I have found in every department, there's always something that nobody knew was there. So whether it was in the chemical room and hooked up to the washer, or in some cases not hooked up to the washer and it was supposed to be, or something surprising underneath the sink, or a spray bottle with something in it that nobody knows what it is because nobody ever bothered to label it. There is always a surprise.
Every day, they slay the dragons of healthcare-acquired infections and dangerous microbial fire breathers. While you may not see them during your next hospital stay, they will be there, ensuring the safest possible surgeries by skillfully wielding their disinfecting weapons of mass microbial destruction. They are sterile processing professionals. And this is Beyond Clean, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are pushing the global sterile processing industry forward. Join us every week as we introduce you to the unsung heroes who are fighting dirty around the globe. And now, it's time to go Beyond Clean.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Peggy Spitzer, clinical education and technical support at Certol International. Peggy is a Colorado native with over 30 years of combined experience as a healthcare provider and educator, holding degrees as a licensed dental hygienist with a bachelor's and master's degree in adult education. She provides education programs across the United States to Sterile Processing and APIC chapters, focusing on helping clinicians use cleaning chemicals safely and effectively. She is proud to promote education and certification in the central sterile processing departments around the country. Peggy is a past president, past secretary, and current treasurer of the Rocky Mountain Central Sterile Chapter in Denver, Colorado, and also provides consulting to healthcare facilities and universities for chemical management and best practices for instrument processing. So, Bob, today we're going to talk with Peggy specifically around SDS, formerly known as MSDS, and really about employee safety. And we've had several previous podcasts about employee safety, but again, I always feel like the employees tend to put themselves second and put the patient first, which is great, but we have to protect ourselves to take care of the patients and make sure that they get great care too.
Yeah, this is going to be a great discussion, Justin. I can't wait to talk to Peggy. I often run into her on the speaking circuit as I'm going around the country too, and I swear every time I hear her speak, I learn something new. So I just can't wait to hear what kind of nuggets she's going to provide for us today.
As a reminder, you can subscribe to Beyond Clean on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, or search for Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast application. We can also be heard on the Sterile Education app available on iTunes and Android. Follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info, Facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast, LinkedIn.com/company/Beyond Clean, Instagram is Beyond Clean Podcast, and we're also really pleased to announce that we've kicked off our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond Clean, featuring Beyond the Headlines with Mike Matthews, Real Talk with Bob Mars, and Fighting Dirty with Hank Balch. Finally, for all of you frontline leaders out there, we've added mentorship programs and same-day assessments. And for the vendors, we have Vendor Spotlight podcasts release every Friday and social media consulting opportunities. So to learn more, contact us by emailing info@beyondclean.net. Before we get started, Season 5 of Beyond Clean is brought to you by EndoPlus and Ready Set Surgical. EndoPlus is an original equipment manufacturer that has made purchasing new laparoscopic instruments nearly as simple as buying a book on Amazon. Visit endoplususa.com/BC to learn why hospitals and surgery centers across the U.S. are switching to EndoPlus's patented laparoscopic scissors. And don't miss out on EndoPlus's limited time offer for Season 5 Beyond Clean listeners who will receive a Yeti 10-ounce insulated wine tumbler tumbler with the purchase of a lap instrument. EndoPlus is your competent, reliable resource for a comprehensive preventive maintenance program for all of your laparoscopic devices. Find what you need, make informed decisions, be supported at endoplususa.com/BC. That's ENDOPLUSUSA.com/BC. Got loaners? Get ReadySet. ReadySet automates the loaner and consignment supply chain while driving greater transparency and accountability amongst vendors. ReadySet's cloud-based coordination platform consolidates logistics, documentation, and communication for all members of the procedural team to ensure that every procedure has the right equipment at the right time with complete documentation. Interested in learning more? Listen to founder and CEO Kirthi Kanabadi's Season 1 interview on Beyond Clean. Sign up for a demo today, and as a loyal Beyond Clean listener, you are eligible for a 6-month no-obligation trial of the ReadySet platform. Just remember to mention Beyond Clean in your demo or trial request to take advantage of this offer. Are you ready? Get ReadySet.
You're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us now is Peggy Spitzer, Clinical Education and Technical Support at Certol International. Peggy, this isn't your first appearance on the show. Last time we talked about enzymatics. Now we have you back to talk about chemical safety in sterile processing, and really looking forward to this one. I don't know how much we've ever really talked about safety data sheets and SDS, but I do know we've talked about safety numerous times, and I just don't think we can emphasize it enough. We're always focused on patient safety, but talking about employee safety is really important too. So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, and very happy to be with you tonight.
I think, one of the things that people don't always realize is that these chemicals sometimes have odors, and people may experience some discomfort, but that's not always going to be the case. And I think it's important to talk about the effects of these chemicals that they may have on workers if they're used improperly, especially. And maybe we could just start there. What are some of the effects that employees and sterile processing technicians may experience?
Good question. And I think that some of the effects can be obvious. If someone has irritation, a splash in the eye, some of this may be very obvious and they'll notice it right away. But I think there's also the potential for very low-level irritation, either on the skin or the inhalation of fumes. And this is a very hidden danger. Basically, there are 2 types of exposure, and that is a chronic exposure. It may be low-level, something that someone doesn't really notice day to day until the effects build up. And this can be inhalation of various fumes or irritants, which eventually leads to some type of asthma, breathing difficulties, or the same type of chronic low-level exposure that can lead to skin irritation or rashes. One of my favorite stories is a person that called saying that they had started using our detergent and they weren't happy with it because they had a rash on their stomach. And this led to a discussion of PPE and the fact that the person was not using a waterproof apron. And this was the first time they'd used a product that actually had enzymes in it. And enzymes will affect protein, and you are protein. So that's an example of what seems to be a very innocent, very low-level type of product that doesn't seem to be a problem, but can become a problem at a chronic low-level exposure. And then versus that is acute, very high-level exposures like chemical burns, splashes or damage to the eyes, even an exposure to certain types of chemicals that could lead to a loss of consciousness, fainting. Those are considered acute exposures. But overall, the main message I really would like to get across to your listeners about chemicals is that your eyes and your lungs are especially vulnerable.
Thank you, Peggy. That really puts it into perspective for us for sure. I think just from my experience in managing sterile processing and now going around the country and looking at these departments, I think all too often we don't spend enough time focusing on safety. I see far too many technicians, like you said in your story, not wearing the proper PPE in the decontamination area or practicing proper safety methods. So I've been doing some video series on LinkedIn, and I've been covering IFUs. If we distinguish the difference between the IFU, the instruction for use, and the safety data sheet, why do you think the IFUs are getting all of the hot press right now and the safety data sheets don't get the same amount of press?
Oh, that's a great question. And frankly, safety data sheets are just, dare I say, not sexy. So IFUs are getting the attention as an important document for good reason. IFUs are the item that are focused on by accrediting agencies and surveyors. So the surveyors are bringing the department to the attention of using and paying attention to IFUs. Nobody is really paying attention to the use of a safety data sheet. And I would like to remind the listeners that for years we referred to these as material safety data sheets, or MSDS. And it's still the same document, but now it's referred to as a safety data sheet, or SDS. So it's just something that is not referred to as much by accreditation or other surveyors or people who are doing oversight in general. It's not that both documents are important in a department, but the IFU is the one that's getting all the attention in a survey, and I believe that's probably why in the very difficult and complicated environment of a department, there's only so much time and attention, and people tend to now realize that they have to have the IFUs, and the safety data sheets have just faded to the corner. But they're still extremely important, and they, in fact, work together. In many cases, for an IFU, you need to have the chemical safety data sheet in order to meet the IFU. So it's not that one is less important than the other. They both are important, and departments need to have files for both.
So one of the things that we love about about SDS is that the structure for the documentation is really good and very consistent. We don't have that structure necessarily the same with IFUs, and it was something that we discussed with Andy Petrovich on a previous podcast. But maybe you could also tell us more about what does an SDS have on it and discuss that wouldn't be listed on an IFU, because you just mentioned they may go hand in hand. So if that's the case, what does an SDS have that an IFU would not?
That's another good question, and I do think that the IFUs are improving, but they don't have currently the standardized structure that you have in a safety data sheet. So what happened back around 2012 is that there was a requirement because of the globally harmonized system, the GHS, requiring all chemical manufacturers to structure their safety data sheet in a standardized format. And this is wonderful for you, the end user, because now if you're looking for the ingredients, that is the chemicals in the item, it's always going to be in a certain section, and that's section 3. If you need first aid, it's always in section 4. If you need to find out the pH of your detergent for your IFU, it's always in section 9. So this is terrific for the end user because you don't have a lot of time to look these things up, and now you have a standardized structure for finding everything in the safety data sheet. But they definitely have very different purposes between the safety data sheet and the IFU. So the IFU is customized or specialized for each particular device. The safety data sheet is customized or specialized for each brand of chemical. So you cannot interchange, for example, enzyme detergent. Every enzyme detergent may have a similar safety data sheet, but each one is unique to that product. So if you switch to a new product, you must have the safety data sheet that matches that brand, and you must have one that is updated with the most recent version, because they do get updated every 3 to 5 years. So they definitely complement each other, but they have very different purposes. The safety data sheet will tell you what the exact chemical is, the list of ingredients or agents. It tells you whether there are warnings or dangers. Those are signal words. The warning is less of a warning of a issue, and the danger is a higher type of issue. That's a signal word. Then there's a section for first aid. It tells the user what PPE is required, and that will be specified on your safety data sheet for that particular chemical. And that is, the PPE is outlined in a section that is typically section 8 or 9 that has your exposure controls for the particular chemical. And also it tells you under section 7, you'll have precautions for safe handling and storage conditions. And that's very important for you to know what types of things to wear and have. And then under Section 8 are exposure controls and personal protection. Section 8 will tell you what types of PPE you need to wear. So the IFU is for the device, and the SDS is for the chemical. And both documents are important for your department to have on file.
Okay, so Peggy, all this great information about safety, how do we help sterile processing departments understand how to stay up to date with the most current safety data sheets that they can get for their facility for each product that they're using?
So trying to keep your documents updated for every type of thing that you're keeping track of in the department, very, very complicated. I know that many managers prefer to have at least one set of paper documents. And this is a fine approach. It is a lot of time to get into that notebook, physically add these safety data sheets, and then remove the old ones, put in the new ones, make sure that they're alphabetized or tabbed in some fashion, because the key thing with safety data sheets is quick, easy access in the case of an emergency for first aid and other issues. So a paper notebook is still a very legitimate way to have a safety data sheet. It's just very time consuming. So a lot of folks have gone to electronic forms of safety data sheet management. And this is where I think, especially for your larger facilities, this is where you turn to risk management and your facilities managers and perhaps your supply chain manager to find systems that have automatic updates and that have electronic access to safety data sheets. This is absolutely fine. It's totally legal. It meets all the requirements, with a very important issue that your staff, that is every worker, must have easy access to these safety data sheets. They can't be on a computer in the manager's office locked up during a shift and nobody can get in there. So let's say it's the night shift and nobody has access to that computer. So electronic versions are absolutely fine. They must be on a workstation and computer that is easily accessible and everybody knows how to access it. And furthermore, that the workers know how to read a safety data sheet quickly to find especially safety or first aid information. So this is really gets into training, not just how you organize it, but also access to it. So basically you're looking at printed copies, you're looking at electronic copies, but either way you need to have some sort of process, probably like most of your other documents in the department. You have some sort of an annual reminder, an annual calendar, hopefully not everything being due in the same month, but you have an annual calendar where you have a schedule, and you'll say, okay, in the month of October, we go through and we check all our safety data sheets, and we look online or we check with our supplier and find out if there's a new version of the safety data sheet. Most companies will post their safety data sheets for the products right on the company's website. And no matter what, you should be able to easily get the new versions through your supplier or directly from the company itself.
That's wonderful, Peggy. Thank you so much. It's so I guess aggravating to me when I keep hearing you when you're referencing the safety data sheets. saying X is in Section 4, X is in Section 8, X is in Section 7. Yet when we think about the IFUs and you open an IFU, it's almost impossible to find what you're looking for, no matter whose IFU you're looking at. I'd love to see us be able to get standardization with IFUs like we have in safety data sheets. Really, really good information. So as we're looking through all this and we're talking, we hear a lot of information and we hear a lot of acronyms like OSHA and Hazmat and various things. Can you help us understand what some of those mean and what the purpose is for them in the sterile processing department? The importance, really.
Absolutely. So OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It is a federal agency, and OSHA, in terms of employers and employees, it's a regulation. One of the things I was really happy to hear at ISHM this year in 2019 is the emphasis to the audience about the importance of following regulations. So OSHA is active in all 50 states, also in the territories, and it emphasizes worker safety. So OSHA doesn't, I think in many people's minds, OSHA stands for infection control, and that is not true. OSHA is worker safety, and in fact, only part of it has anything to do with infection control. So OSHA is worker safety, that's number one, and it is the responsibility of the employer to actually arrange all of these materials, the training, providing PPE. It's not the responsibility of the worker. The responsibility of the worker is to wear the PPE or follow the rules. So where I see a very important role is for a department manager, in sterile processing in particular, for a sterile processing manager to be the advocate for the team in sterile processing between the department and the administration and owners of the facility to make sure that everybody knows what the requirements are and that indeed they are being followed. So OSHA, and this is a very general way to say this, but OSHA is really three main parts. There is a general duty clause, and that's just to maintain a generally safe environment. And then there's the OSHA bloodborne pathogen standard, and there's the OSHA hazardous materials standard. So the bloodborne and the hazardous standards are two separate standards. Both are very important for worker safety, but today we're basically focusing on the hazardous materials part of OSHA. And it's definitely there to protect workers. One of the phrases I really like that OSHA uses is it's called right to know and safe work environment. So what they're saying is the worker has the right to know what types of chemicals they're using, what are the risks, not every little risk, but what are the major risks, and how to handle the product or material safely. And it is on the employer to know all the chemicals that are being used in their business and to train workers and to provide PPE. It is a federal regulation. It is a law with fines, and the fines are not on the department or the workers. The fines are on the employer. So I think it's really important for employees to understand that they do have rights, and unfortunately, sometimes there's a little difficulty there with employers in providing workers full information because sometimes employers feel it's against their own interest for the employees to be fully educated. I honestly don't know how to feel about that other than managers need to know what OSHA is and how to carefully but effectively advocate for their team.
That's great because you were leading right to my next question, which is really focused on department leaders. And I just remember working as a nurse, there's always this whole training that you go through with employee onboarding, and nothing is more boring than going through the policies and procedures and learning about SDS and where that book is stored and taking maybe a little quiz afterwards. It always feels like everybody just wants to rush through that. So keeping that in mind, how do leaders make this topic and this information real and get their teams engaged so that they actually remember it when they really need it?
That's a really excellent point, and I really like how you commented on how it usually seems to play out. Because, yes, I do think it becomes a canned training exercise, and I think what's really important for sterile processing managers to understand is that there are two basic parts for training that are regulations and they are required. One is that new workers do need to be brought on board with OSHA training, explaining the types of chemicals and materials that they will be handling, how to do them safely, also whatever is the bloodborne pathogens part of their training. That all needs to be done within 10 days of being hired. And that's a pretty difficult thing, I think, for almost any healthcare facility to try to work that training in that quickly. But it's very, very important because they need to be safe right away. It's not something that can be delayed. And then the other part of it is what people I think oftentimes forget is that OSHA has annual training requirements. And the OSHA annual training is a review. It doesn't have to be in great in-depth, but it must be customized to the chemicals and issues of that particular work area. So where I feel that sterile processing gets shortchanged is that there are unique chemical issues in sterile processing that don't apply to the rest of the hospital or healthcare facility. And then everybody in the facility takes the same annual test on a computer, which, as you say, most people want to just take and get it over with, not understanding that they're being shortchanged on what can really help improve their own personal safety. So to answer your real question, which is how do we make this real and engaging for workers? And I don't think it has to be long. I don't think it has to be tedious. I think what you do is you, for one thing, take a chemical that the department actually uses, and maybe something that's not even that dangerous. Perhaps the workers all have a certain product everybody uses at the sink, some type of detergent, and everybody thinks it's pretty safe. And then have somebody do like a little scavenger hunt with the safety data sheets, maybe make several copies, and somebody has to find a section that tells what the product is or what color it is or how it smells or what they have to wear for PPE. Or maybe each person gets a different safety data sheet and they go around in turns and just talk about some section of their particular one. I think the key thing is to have products that the department actually uses, have the real safety data sheets for them, and let everybody have a chance to participate. And if the department, perhaps if the manager feels that someone is not a great reader, maybe someone can even do a little scavenger hunt where they just look under the sink or look in the cupboard and find a product that's in use and then see if they can find the safety data sheet for it and have somebody help them read a section of it and what does that mean. So the key thing is have real products, things that the department actually uses, let everybody have some type of participation, keep it short, and it has to be done at least once a year and documented.
That's really great information, Peggy. So we have so many chemicals that we use in the department, both in the decontam side, on the clean side. What's the importance of having a really good chemical inventory in your facility? And can you give us some recommendations for maybe best practice in creating and maintaining an inventory of the chemicals that you use?
Yes. As far as chemical inventory, there's two stages. I would suggest one stage, especially for a new manager or perhaps someone who's having to take over even temporarily for somebody else, and perhaps the department may not have a real accurate or updated chemical inventory, is to take parts of the department. This is even something that would be another way to involve other members of the team. Take the chemical room, take the cupboards, take the whatever other sections have chemicals, and divide it up and have people make a handwritten list of everything they find. I think if people really stop and look and see what's in their chemical room, they will be very surprised. I know that the departments that I've been in, and I'm sure I don't do the thousands of visits a year that some people do. So I will just tell you that even in the few departments that I have been able to go into, I have found in every department there's always something that nobody knew was there. So whether it was in the chemical room and hooked up to the washer, or in some cases not hooked up to the washer and it was supposed to be, or something surprising underneath the sink, or a spray bottle with something in it that nobody knows what it is because nobody ever bothered to label it. There is always a surprise. So that is your absolute first thing, is to take a chemical inventory or chemical audit. However you do it, it does need to be done on a regular basis. But the first go-around is you have to go through the aggravation and the effort of looking in every possible place and making lists until you finally consolidate and have a really accurate chemical list. This list is the foundation for everything else you do, because then once you have the list and you get rid of the outdated things that nobody knew they had, once you have a list of the actual chemicals, then you've got to cross-reference and find out that you have the safety data sheets for every chemical. Then you're going to find out, in fact, if all those chemicals are really necessary. And then you're going to find out if you have training for everybody to handle all those chemicals correctly based on the safety data sheets. So that chemical inventory, that's the foundation of everything. And the other thing I like to share about chemicals and having an inventory is there's really two things that are happening there. They're so important. One is that once you've done the chemical inventory and you have the safety data sheets, this is your way to help all the team stay safe. This is very important. You have a chemical inventory, and then you have the safety data sheets, and this is to help everyone stay safe, to help with training and education. But the other important thing of having this inventory is once you know for sure what chemicals you do have in your department, then you're going to be able to cross-reference those chemicals and those safety data sheets with your device IFUs. So this is bringing us back now to those IFUs, because you're going to go through the IFUs and see, oh, look, we're supposed to use a neutral pH detergent on these instruments. Oh, look, is this chemical neutral pH? Oh, surprise, no, it's not. And then you try to take the appropriate actions. You may have to change products and find the appropriate product to meet that device IFU. And now you've gone a long way towards improving the condition and the service life of that instrument and ultimately improving patient safety.
Well, that really is number one, patient safety. But as we talked about a lot here, it's about employee safety as well. And the whole conversation around OSHA was something that we also spoke on a previous episode with David Hilliker. And I don't think everybody is always really understanding that and the purpose of all these different organizations. And I think it really helps that you came on and clarified that as well, and the importance of the SDS data sheets. And Peggy, anything that we didn't cover on this episode before we wrap?
I did think of another topic that unfortunately in a audible type of format is not as easy to cover, because there is a visual element to safety data sheets that we did not discuss. On the safety data sheet, another important piece of information is the hazards identification by using symbols called pictograms. And the pictograms are a way of communicating various types of hazards to the worker without using words. So the idea is that even if someone is not literate in a certain language, that they can see the symbols and know that this chemical has certain issues or hazards. One that we're very familiar with is the skull and crossbones. And this is, of course, a warning for acute toxicity. Another very common symbol that you will see in a pictogram is an exclamation point. And an exclamation point is usually some type of irritant. The irritant can be a strong irritant or a mild irritant, is a very common type of symbol. So that is an important piece of the safety data sheet, and it's an important part of training that workers need to be able to identify these pictograms and understand what a picture means and be able to do it in an emergency or just when they're handling a product.
So, Peggy, you really nailed it on this one.
Well, thank you for having me again, and I always enjoy working with your group. A lot of excellent information that you get out to Sterile Processing.
That was Peggy Spitzer, Clinical Education and Technical Support at Certol International, and we talked about chemical safety in the world of clean today, Bob. She has so much good information to share. We actually had a part 1 and a part 2 previously when she came on our show. We talked about enzymatics at that time. She had a great quote talking about how we could just slap Beyond Clean on a detergent and away we go. We have our first product. Was a great quote, and she's always an entertaining guest, but very knowledgeable, and really loved what she had to say today.
Yeah, it was a great interview. I think I was saying it earlier, but I love the point she made about anytime she goes into facility, she finds a surprise. Any of us that have gone around and been in more than one facility find that. We see the Ajax and the bleach or the palm olive or whatever it might be, but it's really, really important. The information she gave us tonight was really, really good for managers and departments.
Yeah, I've often said in doing educational programs, there's many departments, like you said, you can go and find that surprise. And it's the same thing as nurses hoarding instruments in the OR. You know, there's always stuff hiding somewhere. It's the go-to move for many people. So, really great point that she made there, and making sure that you have an SDS that says that it's for use on surgical instruments is so important. That's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes or Stitcher and Google Play or Spotify. Simply search for Beyond Clean Podcast. We'd certainly appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, or if you'd like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank, Bob, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.